Chloe has spent the better part of her senior year creating the perfect prom dress, a project that connects her to the memory of her late mother. Her life in a blended family is fraught with tension, largely due to her jealous stepsister, Tiffany, and enabling stepmother, Brenda, who resent Chloe's talents and her close bond with her father. Mark, terrified of further conflict after losing his first wife, practices a form of willful blindness, consistently placating his new family at Chloe's expense. The inciting incident occurs just days before prom when Tiffany, in a fit of rage, deliberately ruins Chloe's dress. When Chloe's plea for justice is met with her father's suggestion to simply buy something cheap, something inside her breaks. This betrayal becomes the catalyst for a meticulously orchestrated plan. Chloe decides she will not only get a new dress but will also hold Tiffany and Brenda accountable in the one language her father can no longer ignore: money. She begins by creating a detailed invoice for the destroyed dress, cataloging the cost of materials and, crucially, assigning a professional seamstress's rate to her hundreds of hours of labor. While purchasing a stunning, expensive replacement dress, she stumbles upon evidence of her stepmother and stepsister's reckless spending and financial deception. The mission escalates from getting compensated for a dress to exposing a larger pattern of manipulation. The climax arrives on the night of the prom. After making a breathtaking entrance in her new gown and enjoying her evening, Chloe returns home to confront her father. She presents him not only with the staggering, itemized bill for both dresses, but also with a file of receipts and credits, card statements proving Brenda and Tiffany's secret debts and deceit. The carefully constructed facade of their happy family shatters. The resolution sees a broken but honest new reality. The relationship with her father begins a slow, painful process of healing, now based on truth instead of appeasement. Chloe emerges not as a victim, but as a young woman who found her strength, defended her value, and learned that sometimes the only way to fix a broken thing is to first let it fall completely apart. The hum of my sewing machine was the only sound in the house that felt truly mine. It was a steady, rhythmic purr, a sound my mom had loved. She'd sat in this very chair, her foot on this same pedal, her hands guiding fabric with a grace that I still aspired to. Now, it was just me and the singer, working under the glow of a single lamp in my bedroom. Outside my door was their world, my dad's world, which had become Brenda's world, which in turn had become Tiffany's world. My room was my sanctuary, a small island of before in an ocean of after, and on the dress form in the corner stood the culmination of my senior year. Not finals, not college applications, boot ties, dresses, layers of periwinkle blue silk chiffon, so fine it seemed to float even in the still air of my room. A bodice embroidered with tiny, shimmering silver beads, each one stitched by hand. I had sketched the design in the back of my calculus notebook. Rafina Dietz made a muslin prototype, and spent every spare moment since Christmas bringing it to life. It wasn't just a prom dress. It was a conversation I was still having with my mom. See, I was listening. I remember how you told me to let the fabric speak. This dress was a symphony. What are you still doing in there? The voice, sharp and unwelcome, cut through my concentration. Tiffany. She didn't bother knocking, just pushed the door open enough to stick her head in. Her eyes, small and perpetually unimpressed, immediately found the dress. It's almost done, I said, my foot easing off the pedal. The machine whirred to a stop. WOW, sighed, the word dripping with a sarcasm so thick it was practically tangible. Still working on that thing. She stepped inside, her movements always a little too aggressive for the space. She circled the dress form like a shark. It's very blue. It's periwinkle, I corrected, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. Whatever ... it looks like a figure skater's costume from the 90s. She reached out a hand, her acrylic nails dangerously close to the delicate chiffon. I flinched. Don't touch it, please. She pulled her hand back with a dramatic sigh. So high-spring, Chloe. It's just a dress for a stupid dance. I just bought mine online. Took 5 minutes. It's designer, by the way. Of course it was. Everything Tiffany had was designer. Purchased with my dad's money. A fact she never let me forget. My dad, Mark, was a good man. A kind man. A man so terrified of rocking the boat after my mom died that he would do anything to keep the peace with his new wife and stepdaughter. Usually, that meant buying it. That's nice, Tiffany, aside, turning back to my machine, a clear dismissal. Liam asked you right, she pressed, ignoring the hint, my hands stilled. Liam was everything. He was the captain of the soccer team, yes. But he was also the boy who drew comics in the margins of his history notes and had a smile that made my stomach do a nervous little flip. He'd asked me in the library, stammering and blushing, and it was a moment I had replayed in my mind 100 times. Yes, I'd trying to keep my voice neutral. Weird, she mused, tapping a finger against her chin. I told everyone he was going to ask me. I guess he has a thing for it. Homemade crafts. The bob landed, sharp and precise. I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't just about the dress, or Liam, or prom. It was about everything. It was about the space she took up in my house, in my life. It was the way she looked at my father, a look of triumphant ownership, while I felt like I was becoming a ghost in my own home. I have to finish this seam. Aside, my voice tight. Could you please close the door on your way out? She laughed, a short, ugly sound. Fine. Have fun with your little project. Try not to stay up all night. You don't want bags under your eyes for the big night. Not that it would make a difference. And with that, she was gone, leaving the door wide open. The scent of her cloyingly sweet perfume lingered in the air. An invasive presence. I sat there for a long moment, listening to her heavy footsteps recede down the hall. I looked at my dress, my beautiful, perfect dress. A wave of protectiveness washed over me. So fierce it surprised me. It was more than fabric and thread. It was my history. It was my heart. And I had a sudden, sickening premonition that she was going to find a way to ruin it. The blended family experiment had been going on for 3 years. That's what Dad called it in the beginning, with a forced, salesman-like enthusiasm. It'll be an adventure, Chloe. A new chapter for all of us. He had met Brenda at a work conference, a whirlwind romance that felt less like love and more like a desperate attempt to fill the gaping silence. My mom's passing had left in our house. Brenda was polished, her hair was always perfectly blonde, her nails always perfectly manicured, her smile always perfectly stretched. She talked a lot about synergy and positive energy, but her eyes were like little calculators, constantly assessing situations for their benefit. She and Tiffany moved in 6 months after they met, their belongings subsuming ours like an invasive species. My mom's muted, earthy pottery was replaced with stark white vases. Our comfortable, worn-in sofa was ousted for a sterile leather monstrosity that was cold in the winter and sticky in the summer. Dad wanted it to work so badly. He'd lost his wife. And I think the thought of failing at this new life, of being alone again, was more than he could bear. So he became an expert in conflict avoidance. Tiffany wants the bigger bedroom, with the ensuite, the one that had been my parents' room. It makes sense, Chloe. She's new here. We want her to feel welcome. Brenda wants to re-landscape the entire garden, digging up the rose bushes my mom planted. A fresh start is good for the house, honey. Every concession felt like a small betrayal. Another shovelful of dirt on my mother's memory. I tried to talk to him about it once, a few months after they moved in. We were in the garage, the one place that still felt like ours, surrounded by his tools and my mom's old gardening supplies. That I'd started, my voice trembling slightly. It feels like you're letting them erase her. The look on his face was one of such profound, gut-wrenching pain that I almost took it back. He sank onto an old stool, his shoulders slumping. Chloe, no, never. Your mother was the love of my life, but she's gone, and I'm trying to build something new for us / Brenda and Tiffany. They've had a hard time too. I just need you to try for me. And what could I say to that? I loved my father. I saw his grief, his desperation. So I tried. I smiled when Brenda called me hun. I tolerated Tiffany's endless stream of insults. I retreated into my room, into my schoolwork, into the quiet, comforting world of sewing my mom had given me. The dress was my rebellion. It was me, purely and simply. It wasn't something they could buy or influence. Its value wasn't in a price tag but in the hours I had poured into it. When I wore it, I wouldn't just be Chloe, the quiet stepsister. I would be Chloe, the girl who could create something beautiful, from scratch, the daughter of a woman who had taught her how. This prom was my one night to step out of the shadows of my own home and feel like the main character. Liam's smile, the laughter of my friends, the swirl of chiffon around my ankles as I danced. / I held on to that image like a talisman. Brenda and Tiffany saw the dress differently. Of course, to them, it was a symbol of my refusal to fully assimilate into their world. It was a link to my mother, a past they were actively trying to pave over. My talent was an inconvenience, a reminder that I had a part of my father's heart that they could never touch. A few days before prom, Brenda cornered me in the kitchen. She was holding a catalog for a cruise line. Mark and I were thinking about a family vacation this summer. SHA sighed, her voice breezy. Wouldn't that be fun? All four of us. I have that internship at the local theater's costume department. I remended hair. I'd worked hard for that. It was unpaid, but it was experience. It was a dream. Her smile tightened infinitesimally. Right, well, family is important too. Chloe, you've been spending so much time alone in your room with that project. It's good to be a part of the world. The implication was clear. My world, the one I was creating, wasn't the right one. Their world of cruises and designer bags and superficial chatter was the one I needed to join. Just nodded, grabbing an apple from the bowl. I'll think about it. But I wouldn't. That internship was my future. The dress was my present, and Tiffany Akinue saw them both as a threat. Her jealousy wasn't just about a boy or a party. It was about a life she couldn't control. And as prom night drew closer, the air in the house grew thick with it, heavy and suffocating, like a storm waiting to break. The night before prom, I put the final stitch in the hem. I stood back, a sense of profound, bone-deep satisfaction washing over me. It was perfect. More than perfect. It was a piece of my soul. Rendered in silk, edged to red. The silver beads on the bodice caught the light, twinkling like a private constellation. I imagined Liam's reaction, the look in his eyes when he saw me. I imagined my friends, Sarah and Maya, gasping and telling me how amazing it looked. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of pure, undiluted joy. I carefully zipped the dress into a protective garment bag, a simple white one, and hung it on the back of my bedroom door. Tomorrow was the day. I fell asleep with a smile on my face, dreaming of music and laughter. Next morning, I woke up late, the sun streaming through my window. It was a beautiful day, perfect for a perfect night. I stretched, yawned, and my eyes immediately went to the back of my door. The white garment bag was different. There was a dark, ugly stain blooming through the fabric, a Rorschach blot of blackness near the middle. My heart stopped. No, I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. My hands were trembling as I reached for the zipper. A cold dread, thick and suffocating, crawled up my throat. I pulled the zipper down. The smell hit me first. Acrid and chemical. Black ink. A whole bottle of it. It looked like, poured directly onto the bodice. It had soaked through the chiffon, staining the delicate periwinkle a sickening, mottled black and purple. The beads were gummy with it. But that wasn't the worst of it. The skirt, beautiful, flowing layers of silk I had so carefully hemmed, had been attacked with scissors. Not a neat cut, but a vicious, hacking motion. Jagged gashes ran up the length of it, shredding the fabric into pathetic, dangling ribbons. It was mutilated, violated. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. Teekes der Kennenge. I reached out a hand to steady myself against the wall, my fingers tracing the jagged, a choked, wounded sob. It wasn't just a dress. It was my mother's legacy. It was my one night. It was my last stand against the slow erasure of my own identity. And she had destroyed it. She had. There was no doubt in my mind who had done this. This wasn't random. This was personal. This was hatred, pure and simple. I sank to my knees on the floor, the ruined dress pooling around me like a shroud. The ink was still damp. It must have happened this morning, or late last night while I slept. I had slept, smiling, while Tiffany crept into my room and murdered my dream. The tears came then, hot and furious, but underneath the grief, something else was beginning to form, a core of anger, so cold and hard it felt like a shard of ice in my chest. The girl who tried to keep the peace, the girl who swallowed insults and ceded ground for her father's sake, died on the floor of her bedroom that morning, surrounded by the ruins of her own creation. I stayed on the floor for what felt like an eternity, my mind a mill of shock and grief. Eventually, Teter subsided, replaced by that chilling, unnerving calm. I took a deep breath, then another. My movements became slow, deliberate, I took out my phone and began to document everything. I took pictures of the ink stain on the garment bag. I took pictures of the ruined dress from every conceivable angle, close-ups of the shredded skirt, the ink-soaked bodice, the hacked seams. Each photo was a piece of evidence, a testament to the violence of the act. Then, I carefully took the dress off the form and laid it flat on my bed. I found the scissors in my sewing kit and, with a steady hand, snipped a small, ink-free swatch of the periwinkle silk from an inside seam. I put it in a small Ziploc bag, a control sample, a memory of what it was supposed to be. I walked out of my room, my phone in my hand, my face a mask of stone. The house was quiet. I found Tiffany in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone at the island, a bowl of sugary cereal in front of her. She looked up as I entered, a flicker of something triumph, anticipation, in her eyes before she schooled her features into a look of bored indifference. "Morning," she chirped, overly cheerful. I said nothing. I just stood there, watching her. Brenda breezed in from the living room, a mug of coffee in her hand. "Good morning, Chloe. Getting a late start for your big day, aren't you?" I held up my phone and swiped through the pictures, my hand as steady as a surgeon's. I didn't speak. I just let the images do the talking. Brenda's smile faltered. She put her mug down, her eyes widening slightly as she saw the pictures of the shredded, stained fabric. Tiffany, however, didn't even flinch. She just raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh my God," Brenda breathed, putting a hand to her chest. "Chloe, what happened? What do you think happened?" "Ask it," my voice low and devoid of emotion. I turned my gaze to Tiffany. Tiffany scoffed, pushing her cereal bowl away. "Don't look at me. I haven't been anywhere near your creepy sewing room. It probably just fell apart. I told you, it looked cheap." The lie was so bald, so effortless, it was almost impressive. The sheer audacity of it, to look me in the eye, knowing what she'd done, and deny it so calmly. It was cut with scissors, Tiffany, and someone poured an entire bottle of India ink on it. My voice was still quiet, but it carried a weight it had never had before. "The bottle from your art set AMG in the one Dad bought you last month that you've never even opened." A flicker of panic in her eyes, this time quickly suppressed. "That's a crazy accusation. You have no proof." "Oh, I think I do," I said. "This happened sometime between when I went to bed and when I woke up. And there are only 4 people in this house." I looked from Tiffany to Brenda, whose face was now a mask of anxious concern. "Chloe, honey, Tiffany would never do something like that," Brenda said, rushing to her daughter's defense. She put an arm around Tiffany's shoulders. "It must have been an accident. Maybe you snagged it on something and didn't realize, and maybe a pen exploded in your room. These things happen." An exploded pen. The suggestion was so insulting, so dismissive of the carnage, that I almost laughed. This was their strategy. Deny, deflect, demeanacy, make me out to be the crazy one, the clumsy one, the one who was overreacting. Right. Aside, the single word imbued with ice, an exploded pen, and a sleep-cutting incident. That makes perfect sense. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them in a stunned silence. I heard Brenda start to whisper furiously to Tiffany, "What did you do?" I didn't wait for the answer. I didn't need it. I went upstairs and changed out of my pajamas. I put on jeans and a black t-shirt. I felt like a soldier dressing for battle. My grief had been cauterized. My sadness had been burned away. All that was left was the plan, which was now blooming in my mind, fully formed and terrifyingly clear. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry in front of them again. I was going to do something far, far worse. I was going to make them pay, in the only language they truly understood. My father came home for lunch, something he rarely did. Brenda must have called him, her voice laced with that fake, syrupy concern she used when she wanted to manage a situation. He found me in my room, sitting on my bed. I had carefully folded the ruined dress and placed it in a box. "Out of sight, Chloe," he said, his voice tentative as he stood in the doorway. "Brenda called. She said something happened to your prom dress." I looked up at him. His face was etched with worry, but it was the worry of a man who hates conflict. He wasn't worried about me so much as he was worried about the impending storm. "She destroyed it," I said flatly. No tears, no hysterics, just a simple statement of fact. He sighed, a long, weary sound, and came to sit on the edge of my bed. He didn't look at the box. He looked at his hands. "Chloe, that's a very serious accusation. Tiffany swears she didn't go near it. Brenda said it might have been an accident. There it was, the immediate, reflexive defense of them, the path of least resistance. Dad sighed, my voice dangerously quiet. Look at me. He finally met my eyes. It was deliberate. She used scissors and a bottle of ink. She did it because she's hateful and jealous. She did it to hurt me, and she is lying to you. He winced, as if the words themselves were a physical blow. Okay, let's just calm down and think about this. Even if Tiffany did do something foolish, fighting isn't going to solve it. It's prom night tonight. We can't get the dress back. So what's the plan? I waited. I wanted to see what he would offer, what his solution would be. We can go to the mall right now. He sighed, his voice gaining a bit of that problem-solving enthusiasm he used at work. We'll find you a new dress, something nice. We'll have it altered this afternoon. It'll be okay, honey. We can fix this. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a few bills, $250s and a $20, $120. He held the money out to me. Here, go find something beautiful. I stared at the cash in his hand. $120. To replace a dress that had taken me 300 hours to make. To replace fabric that had cost nearly $400, saved up from my part-time job. To replace a piece of my heart. That was the moment. The final, irreversibly break. The moment I realized that my father's peace was more important to him than my pain. He wasn't trying to fix this for me. He was trying to fix it for himself. He was trying to put a cheap $120 patch on a gaping wound so he wouldn't have to look at it anymore, so he could go back to pretending we were a happy family. I didn't take the money. I just looked from the cash to his face. My expression unreadable. That's your solution. Ask it. It's the best we can do on such short notice. He sighed, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. What else can we do? The night is ruined if you don't have a dress. The night is not ruined, I said softly. I stood up. You're right. We can't get the dress back, but we can still fix this. I looked him straight in the eye. Don't worry, Dad, I'll handle it. I'll go get a new dress. You just go back to work. Enjoy your lunch. Everything is going to be taken care of. He looked relieved, pathetically, transparently relieved. That's my girl, he sighed, forcing a smile. You're so strong. Just like your mother. The comparison, which usually would have filled me with pride, now tasted like ash in my mouth. He patted my arm, tucked the money back in his wallet, and left. The floorboards creaking his retreat, I stood there for a full minute after he was gone. I was not strong like my mother. My mother would have fought for me. My mother would have raised hell. My mother would not have accepted peace at the price of her daughter's heart. But he had given me an opening. I'll handle it. And I would. Just not in the way he expected. I walked over to my laptop and opened it. The plan had been an abstract concept, a storm cloud of anger. Now, it had a focus. It had a name. I opened a new spreadsheet. In cell A1. I typed, Project Prom, reimbursement invoice. The first step was quantifying the unquantifiable. How do you put a price on love and memory? You can't. But you can put a price on labor and materials. And that, I decided, would have to be enough. I pulled out the binder, where I'd kept every receipt, every fabric swatch, every note from the dress's creation. I was meticulous by nature, a trait I inherited from my engineer father and nurtured by my seamstress mother. It was about to pay off. I created columns in my spreadsheet. Items supplier, quantity, cost, silk chiffon, periwinkle blue fabric depot, 8 yards, $45.99, yard total, $367.92, silver for lining online fabrics for yards, $28.50, yard total, $114, silver glass beads, check, 3 millimeters, the bead gallery, over 1,500 beads, approx 55 seconds and 0 milliseconds, high quality Gutermann thread, Joanne, fabrics over 6 spools, $4.50, spool, total, $27, invisible zipper, YKK, 22-inch, $5.25, premium interfacing, $12.50, pattern paper and muslin for prototype, $25.00. The list went on. Every single item, logged and accounted for. The subtotal for materials alone came to $606.67. I stared at the number. It was more than I had even realized. I had bought things gradually, over months, so the total impact had been softened. Seeing it in one lump sum was staggering. But that was the easy part. The next line item was the one that mattered most. Labor. Tiffany thought my dress was a homemade craft. Brenda thought it was a project. My father thought it was a hobby that could be replaced for $120. They were about to learn its true market value. I opened a new browser tab. I researched professional seamstress and couturier rates in my state. I looked up what it cost to have a custom formal gown made. I found forums, professional websites, articles in bridal magazines. The numbers were eye-opening. A professional's time was valuable, highly valuable. I took the most conservative, reasonable hourly rate I could find for skilled/custom bead and dressmaking, $40 an hour. It wasn't the high-end New York designer rate, but it was a solid, defensible professional standard. Then, I calculated the hours. I went through my calendar from the past 4 months. January 12th, 4 hours. Cutting pattern pieces. January 18th to 19th, 10 hours. Creating and fitting muslin prototype. February, average of 8 hours per week on basic construction. March, the beadwork begins. An estimated 150 hours, 2 to 3 hours every other night. Hunched under a lamp until my eyes burned. The final assembly. Pay finissant, the hand stitching the lining. I was conservative in my estimates. I rounded down, and still, the final number of hours was jaw-dropping. 310 hours. I went back to my spreadsheet and created a new entry. Labor, custom dressmaking and hand beading, 310 hours at $40. Whore, a heat and tear. The spreadsheet calculated the total, $12,400. I leaned back in my chair, my breath catching in my throat. $12,400, plus the materials. The grand total for the destroyed dress was $13,006.67. I felt a dizzying wave of validation. This was not a hobby. This was not a silly little project. This was skilled labor. This was artistry. This was work. And it had a value. A clear, definable, undeniable value. The number wasn't about the money itself. It was about respect. It was a translation. I was translating my pain, my effort, and my talent into a language my father, Brenda, and Tiffany could not pretend to misunderstand. You couldn't dismiss a number like that. You couldn't offer to fix it with $120 from your wallet. I saved the file. Invoice_phase1.xlsx. Phase 1 was complete. Now, it was time for phase 2. The replacement. My father had told me to go to the mall, to find something nice. Okay, I called my best friend, Sarah, I said, my voice even. Change of plans. I need you to pick me up in 20 minutes. We're going shopping. Oh my God, Chloe, what happened? Say Escade, her voice full of panic. / Your dress. Is it okay? No, aside. It's not okay, but the new one is going to be fabulous. There was a pause. / Chloe, she said slowly, you sound different. I am, aside, a small, cold smile touching my lips for the first time that day. Now, hurry up. We're not going to the mall. We're going to the boutiques downtown. Sarah's beat-up Honda Civic felt like a getaway car. The windows were down, the wind whipping through my hair, and for the first time all day, I could breathe. I told her everything as we drove the ink, the scissors, Tiffany's smirk, my dad's pathetic offer of cash. To her credit, Sarah didn't offer platitudes. She just listened, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I was done, she was silent for a moment, then sighed. So what's the plan? Because I know that look on your face. That's the same look you got in 8th grade when you spent a month reverse engineering the math teacher's grading algorithm to prove he graded girls harder on proofs. I laughed, a genuine laugh. / The plan is justice. And a new dress. A very, very expensive new dress. We didn't go to the department stores at the mall, with their racks of perfectly acceptable, mass-produced gowns. We went to a part of the city I'd only ever window shopped in, a street lined with exclusive boutiques, where the dresses in the windows had no price tags. If you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. / Today. That rule didn't apply to me. The first shop we entered was all white walls, chrome fixtures, and intimidatingly chic saleswomen. Can I help you? One of them asked, her eyes flicking over my jeans and t-shirt with visible disdain. Yes, I sighed, my voice clear and confident. I need a prom dress. For tonight. Her expression shifted from disdain to pity. For tonight. Oh honey, that's a challenge. I'm sure you're up to it, I said smoothly. I walked over to a mannequin displaying a gown that shimmered under the track lighting. It was the polar opposite of the dress I had made, where mine had been ethereal and delicate. This was bold and dramatic. It was made of a heavy, liquid-like satin in a deep, stunning emerald gray, and it had a simple, elegant cut that clung to the body, a high slit up one leg, and a neckline that was both sophisticated and daring. It was a dress that said, Ehive Ereved, and you will pay attention. I'd like to try this one. Aside, the saleswoman's eyebrows shot up. That's a runway piece from a new collection. She hesitated. It's perfect. I finished for her. In the dressing room, the dress slid over my skin like cool water. Sarah zipped me up. I turned to face the mirror, and my breath caught. The girl staring back at me was someone I didn't recognize, but someone I desperately wanted to be. She was tall, poised, and dangros. The green of the dress made my eyes pop, and the cut of it made me look confident and strong. Sarah let out a low whistle. Chloe, oh my God, if you walk into prom wearing that, Tiffany might actually spontaneously combust. That's the general idea, I said, a fierce joy blooming in my chest. This wasn't a replacement dress. This was armor. I walked out of the dressing room. The saleswoman's jaw practically hit the floor. Her professional indifference melted away. Wow, say Brayethead. Okay. That dress was made for you. We'll take it. Aside. We walked to the counter. She carefully laid the dress in a large, elegant box, swaddling Yeaton Tisui pepper. Then she cleared her throat and looked at the register. With tax, that will be $2,473.50. Sarah choked on air beside me. I didn't even blink. I just took out my dad's emergency credit card, the one he had given me years ago. For true emergencies only, Chloe. I was fairly certain this qualified. The destruction of $13,000 worth of property and the subsequent declaration of psychological warfare felt like a pretty true emergency. I slid the card across the counter. The saleswoman ran it. The machine beeped, approved. As she handed me the receipt, I folded it carefully and tucked it into my wallet, right next to the swatch of periwinkle silk. Phase 2 was complete. On the way out of the store, I caught something in the window of the boutique next door, a high-end handbag store Brenda frequented. There, on a pedestal, was a purse I'd seen before. I'd seen it on the credit card statement I wasn't supposed to see. The one Dad had left on his desk last month. I'd Googled the name of the store from the statement, curious, and had seen this very bag. He had complained to me just last week about how tight things were, how Brenda's spending was getting out of control. An idea, colder and sharper than any I'd had before, began to form in my mind. The dress was one thing. This was something else entirely. The mission was escalating. The next few hours were a blur of calculated preparation. Sarah dropped me off at home, the large chic boutique box, a stark contrast to my usual backpack. I smuggled it up to my room. Tiffany's door was closed, but I could hear the faint sound of music from within. Good. Let her think I was up here, crying my eyes out. Let her think she had won. My first order of business was to update the invoice. I added a new section, replacement costs and associated expenses. Item: emergency replacement gown, the Emerald Vogue Boutique. Cost: $2,473.50. Item: rush alterations hemming for tonight. Cost: $150. Item: new shoes and accessories to match new gown. Cost: $225.00. I had the receipts for all of it. I scanned them with the app on my phone and embedded the images directly into the spreadsheet file. Undeniable. Then, my mind went back to that purse in the window. To the credit card statement I'd seen. Dad used a shared online portal for the main household credit card, the one Brenda used for groceries and bills. I had the login because I sometimes had to order supplies for the house or pay a bill for him if he was traveling. He trusted me with it. He probably assumed I never looked too closely. I sat down at my laptop, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. This felt different. This felt like crossing a line, but then I thought of his face when he'd offered me that paltry sum of money. I thought of the years of quiet concessions, of being told to be the bigger person. The line had been crossed a long time ago, and not by me. I logged into the credit card portal. I set the date range for the last 6 months. I had been expecting to find some extravagances, a few too many expensive dinners, maybe some online shopping sprees. What I found was a systematic, breathtaking pattern of deception. There were the boutique charges I knew about, but there were hundreds of others. Weekly spa treatments for two, Brenda and Tiffany coded under wellness and medical, charges from a high-end salon listed as personal grooming supplies, a weekend trip to a wine country resort for business development. It was a masterclass in creative accounting. And then I found the refunds. Large sums of money credited back to the account from stores like Home Depot and Best Buy. I cross-referenced the dates. They matched up with times Dad had given Brenda the card to buy a new lawnmower or a replacement dishwasher. It hit me then. She was buying expensive items on the household card, showing Dad the receipt, getting his nod of approval, and then returning the items for cash or store credit, which she would then use for her own luxuries. He was so hands-on, so desperate to avoid scrutinizing her, that he would never think to check if the new lawnmower was, in fact, a top-of-the-line model or a cheap one she bought with cash after returning the expensive one. It was fraud. It wasn't just selfish or extravagant. It was a calculated, long-term deception. She was stealing from him, from us. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage, a pure, white-hot rage. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This wasn't about prom. This was about my father being played for a fool. This was about his new family, who he defended and protected, systematically draining his resources while treating his only daughter with contempt. I started taking screenshots. I saved every statement, highlighted every suspicious charge, every bogus refund. I compiled it all into a separate folder on my desktop. I named it financials_exhibit_b.pdf. The invoice was Exhibit A. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across my room. It was almost time. I showered and did my makeup with a steady hand, creating a dramatic, smoky eye that made me look older. I styled my hair in sleek, elegant waves, and then I put on the dress. The emerald satin felt like a second skin. I looked in the mirror, and for a second, I saw my mom's eyes looking back at me. Not her gentle, smiling eyes, but the fierce, protective eyes she'd had the one time she'd caught a bully pushing me in the schoolyard. The eyes that said, "You have no idea who you're messing with." I was ready. The clock was ticking down to prom. But the real main event would be happening much, much later. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock. I heard my dad's footsteps, then his cheerful voice greeting Liam. I heard Brenda and Tiffany emerge from the living room, no doubt eager to see the pathetic, cobbled-together outfit they imagined I'd be wearing. They were probably expecting tears, a last-minute cancellation, a total victory for them. I took one last look in the mirror, took a deep breath, and opened my bedroom door. I walked to the top of the stairs. The three of them were in the foyer below, their backs to me, facing the front door where Liam stood. He was holding a corsage box. "She's had a bit of a rough day," I heard my dad saying to Liam in a low, apologetic tone. "A little dress mishap." "Oh, I'm sure whatever she wears will be beautiful," Liam said. "Everte." That was my cue. I started down the stairs, my new heels clicking softly on the oak treads. The sound made them all turn. The silence was absolute. It was so complete I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My dad's jaw literally dropped. He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Brenda's perfectly applied smile froze, then crumbled. Her eyes darted from me to my father, a flicker of panic in their depths. But the best reaction, the one I will treasure for the rest of my life, was Tiffany's. Her face went through a rapid, comical series of micro-expressions. First, smug confusion. Then, utter shock. Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes narrowed, and then, hoary, unadulterated fury. Her face flushed a blotchy, ugly red that clashed horribly with her bubblegum pink dress. She looked from my face to the emerald green gown, her eyes lingering on the price tag that was screaming it silent. Instead, I had stolen her spotlight. Liam just smiled. It was a slow, wonderful smile that reached his eyes. "Wow." Chloe his sighed, his voice full of genuine admiration. "You look incredible." He walked to the bottom of the stairs to meet me, his eyes never leaving mine. He handed me the corsage white orchids, a perfect contrast to the emerald green. As he slid it onto my wrist, He leaned in and whispered, "Your dad said there was a mishap. Are you okay?" "I've never been better," I whispered back, and I meant to eat. I turned to face my family, a polite, serene smile on my face, ready to go. I asked Liam loud enough for everyone to hear. My dad was still speechless. Brenda had composed herself, forcing a tight Britley smiley. "You look lovely," Dorothy said, the words sounding like they were being ground out between her teeth. "Where did you find that?" "Downtown," I said simply. Dad was generous enough to let me use the emergency card. I glanced at my father, whose face had now gone pale. The cost was beginning to dawn on him. "Good." Tiffany just glared, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I met her gaze and gave her a small, swayed, devastating smile. "Checkmate." The photographer my dad had hired for pre-prom pictures cleared his throat awkwardly. "Okay, let's get a few shots, shall we?" We posed for the pictures, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. In every photo, A.M. smiling, radiant, Liam is beaming beside me. And in the background, you can just see Tiffany, looking like she's about to swallow her own tongue. They are, to this day, my favorite family photos. Prom was a dream. It was everything I had hoped it would be, even before the nightmare began. The moment Liam and I walked into the ballroom, Sarah and Maya rushed us, screaming with delight. "CHLOE," Sarah yelled, grabbing my hands. "The dress, it's unreal. You look like a movie star, a rich one." "Revenge," Maya whispered in my ear, with a conspiratorial grin. "Looks good on you." For a few hours, I let myself forget about the invoices and the spreadsheets and the impending confrontation. I danced with Liam, his hand warm on my back. We laughed with our friends, shouting over the loud music. We drank punch and took goofy pictures in the photo booth. In the middle of a slow song, Liam pulled me close. "Seriously, Hayside," his voice soft. "You seem different tonight, in a good way. Confident, like you're not afraid of anything." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "Something happened today," I admitted. "It was bad, but it made me realize some things." "What things?" "That I'm tired of being quiet," aside, "and that some things are worth fighting for." He smiled and held me a little tighter. "Well, for what it's worth, I've always thought you were worth fighting for." My heart did a little flutter that had nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with the boy holding me. I saw Tiffany a few times across the crowded room. She was surrounded by her own friends, but she wasn't the radiant center of attention she always expected to be. She kept shooting venomous looks in my direction. Her designer dress, which she had bragged about for weeks, looked flimsy and generic next to the emerald green statement I was wearing. She knew it. Every glare she sent my way was a small victory, fueling the resolve for what was to come. For the first time, her anger didn't scare me or hurt me. It just was a pathetic little storm in a teacup. I realized with a startling clarity that her power over me had been an illusion, one I had helped create by being afraid. I wasn't afraid anymore. When they crowned the prom king and queen, Tiffany was on the court. I saw the look of hungry anticipation on her face as they read the Runev's name. And then, hey, when there, it wasn't her. The crown went to a sweet, popular girl on the student council. The look of utter, childish disappointment on Tiffany's face was the cherry on top of a perfect night. As the dance wound down, Liam walked me out to the parking lot. The air was cool and smelled of night-blooming jasmine. "I had a really amazing time tonight," Chloe Hayes sighed. "Me too," I replied, and it was the honest truth. He walked me to Sarah's car, where she and Maya were waiting to give me a ride home. He leaned in and gave me a soft, sway kiss. "I'll call you tomorrow," Hayes sighed. "I'd like that," Esmeled. As I got into the car, Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide. "Okay, so not only did you get revenge, you also got the guy. This is officially the most productive prom night in history." I laughed, but as we pulled out of the parking lot, the lightness in my chest began to be replaced by a familiar, cold weight. The fun was over. The party was over. It was time to go home and face the music, or rather, it was time to make my family face the invoice. The house was dark when I got home, save for a single lamp in the living room. I knew they would be waiting up. This was too big to ignore. The silence was heavy, expectant. I walked into the living room. My dad was on the couch, Brenda beside him, her hand on his arm. They looked like they were staging an intervention. My dad's face was grim. Brenda's was a mask of strained sympathy. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen, which was probably for the best. This first part was for him. Sit down, Chloe, my dad said, his voice low. I remained standing. I'm okay here. He took a deep breath. I got an alert from the credit card company. A charge for almost $2,500 from a boutique I've never even heard of. He looked at me, his eyes full of a weary disappointment I knew so well. I trusted you with that card for emergencies. This was an emergency, I said calmly. A ruined dress is a mishap, Chloe. Not a $20-5-100 emergency. He sighed, his voice rising. That was irresponsible and reckless. Brenda patted his arm. Now, Mark, let's hear her out. I'm sure she has an explanation. Her voice was pure oil on troubled waters, and it made my skin crawl. She was trying to frame this as me being a spoiled, hysterical teenager. You're right, Brenda. I do have an explanation, I said, my voice cutting through her performance. I pulled my laptop out of my tote bag. I had left it on the hall table before I left. In fact, I have a whole presentation. I opened the laptop and turned it to face my father. I opened the first file. Invoice_phase1.xlsx. The spreadsheet filled the screen, crisp and professional. What is this? My dad asked, leaning forward, squinting. This, I said, is an itemized invoice for the dress Tiffany destroyed. You called it a mishap. I call it the destruction of private property with a replacement value of $13,006.67. The color drained from his face. He stared at the screen, at the lines detailing the cost of silk, the beads, the hours of labor, $12,400. He read that line several times, his lips moving silently. Brenda shot up from the couch. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen. You can't charge for your own time. That's not how it works, isn't it? I scared, my eyes not leaving my father's face. If I had taken this project to a professional, that's a conservative estimate of what they would have charged. My time, my skill, and my materials have value. Just because I am your daughter does not mean my work is free for your stepdaughter to destroy without consequence. My dad was silent, utterly perplexed by the number on the screen. He was an engineer. He understood numbers, costs, and projections. This was a language he couldn't dismiss. Now, I continued, my voice like ice. Let's move on to my expenses for tonight. I clicked over to the next tab, the one with the scanned receipts for the emerald dress, the alterations, the shoes. You called my purchase reckless. But when your stepdaughter destroys over $13,000 worth of my property on the day of my prom, I believe the acquisition of a $2,473 replacement gown is a reasonable and necessary emergency expense. In fact, I'd call it a bargain. This is insane, Brenda sputtered, looking at my dad. Mark, are you going to let her talk to us this way? But my dad wasn't looking at her. He was still staring at the screen, at the Sierra. Overwhelming numbers. He was finally beginning to understand the scale of it. Not the emotional scale. Not yet. But the financial one. And for him, that was the entry point. So, I said, closing the first file, that's the bill for the dress. A grand total of $15,855.17. I'll expect a check. But funnily enough, while I was out today, I started thinking about money. About family finances. I looked Brenda straight in the eye. A cold, predatory smile touched my lips. And that brings me to Exhibit B. I clicked open the PDF file, financials_exhibit_b.pdf. The first page of the highlighted credit card statement filled the screen, and the room went completely, deathly silent. The first page showed the charges from the spa, coded as wellness. The second showed the high-end salon, coded as supplies. The third showed the boutique purchases, the ones I knew my dad had never approved of, page after page of it. I slowly scrolled through the document, letting each charge sink in. My dad leaned closer to the screen. His face, which had been pale with shock, was now darkening with a dawning terrible understanding. What is this, Brenda? He asked, his voice a low rumble. He didn't look at her. He couldn't take his eyes off the screen. Brenda's face had gone from red to a waxy, sick-looking white. That's our household account, Mark. Those are just bills. You know how expensive things are. Her voice was high and thin. $800 at a day spa is not bills. Aside, scrolling to the next page, and here's my favorite part. I showed him the section with the returned merchandise. The Home Depot charge for $1,200 for a professional-grade riding mower, followed 2 days later by a refund for the same amount. The mower, my dad whispered. He looked over at Brenda, really looked at her, for the first time all night. You told me they had delivered it. You said it was in the shed. It is, insisted, her voice cracking. It's there. Chloe is twisting things. She's a liar. She's been a vindictive, jealous child since the day I moved in here. Am I asked calmly. Dad, when was the last time you actually looked in the shed? Because I did this afternoon. There's a 10-year-old push mower in there. Not a $1,200 riding mower. The air left the room. My dad stood up slowly, his movements stiff, robotic. He looked like a man who had just been woken from a long dream. He looked at Brenda, at her frantic, pleading face, and I saw the last vestiges of his willful blindness crumble away, turning to dust. And Tiffany, hey Isked, his voice dangerously soft. Was she in on this? Brenda started to cry. Big, theatrical, gulping sobs. She's just a child. She doesn't understand money. I just wanted to give us a nice life. It was a confession. Right on cue, Tiffany chose that moment to make her entrance. She came down the stairs, drawn by the sounds of conflict. She was in her pajamas, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She saw the tears on her mother's face, and the look on my dad's, and her own face hardened. What did you do? Say spet et me. What did you tell them? The truth, I sighed. It's a new concept for this house, but I think it has potential. You ruined my prom night. She shrieked, her voice raw with fury. My dad turned on her, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw him look at his stepdaughter without a trace of affection or indulgence. Did you destroy Chloe's dress? He asked, his voice like granite. Tiffany looked at her mother, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth to lie, I could see it, but she looked back at my dad's face, at the cold, hard fury there, and her bravado failed her. She just stood there, silent, which was an answer in itself. Get your things, my dad said, his voice eerily calm. He looked at Brenda. Both of you, get your things and go to a hotel. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss logistics. Mark, no, Brenda wailed. You can't. We're a family. A family doesn't steal from each other, he said, the words sounding like they were being torn from his soul. A family doesn't systematically lie and destroy things. I have been a fool, a blind, pathetic fool. But I am not a fool anymore. He turned his back on her. Get out of my house. The finality in his voice was absolute. Brenda and Tiffany stood there for a moment, stunned into silence. Then, with a final hate-filled glare at me, they turned and went up the stairs. My dad sank back onto the couch. He's head in, he's hens. He didn't speak. The only sounds were the muffled noises from upstairs of drawers being slammed and bags being zipped. I stood there, the laptop still warm in my hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound, hollow exhaustion. I had won. I had exposed them. I had gotten my justice. But the victory felt heavy. It felt like shattered glass. The house was broken. My father was broken. And I was the one who had swung the hammer. It was a necessary act, but it was an act of destruction nonetheless. I looked at the man on the couch, my father, who looked smaller and older than he had just an hour before. We were the only ones left, sitting in ruins. The next morning, the silence in the house was a physical presence. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a Sunday morning. It was the dead, hollow silence of a tomb. I came downstairs to find my dad sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Morning, he sighed, his voice raspy. Morning. I poured myself a glass of orange juice, my movements feeling loud and intrusive in the quiet. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I didn't know what to say. He was the one who finally broke it. I owe you an apology, Chloe. He didn't look at me, just at his cup. No, that's not right. I owe you 1,000 apologies. For 1,000 different things. He finally lifted his head and met my eyes. The shame and regret there were so profound, so raw, that I had to look away. I saw what they were doing, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Not the details, not the stealing, but I saw the way they treated you. The little cuts, the dismissiveness. I saw it, and I chose not to see it, because I was a coward. I was so terrified of being alone again, so desperate to make this second chance work, that I sacrificed your happiness for my own peace and quiet. There is no excuse for that, / none. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he didn't bother to wipe it away. The dress was the final straw. When you showed me that invoice, it wasn't just the money, Chloe. It was the hours, 310 hours. I saw that number, and I pictured you in your room, Negat, Efter Negat, working so hard on something you loved, while I was downstairs, letting them mock you for it. I failed you. As a father, I failed you. The cold, hard shell of anger I had been carrying for 24 hours finally cracked. A sob escaped me, one I hadn't realized I was holding in. I sat down opposite him, and we just looked at each other across the table, two broken people in a broken house. What happens now? Get, I don't know. Hey admitted, lawyers, guest divorce. It's going to be messy. Brenda has already been calling, he sighed, a sound of infinite weariness. But that's my mess to clean up, not yours. My only job now is to try and fix this. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His hand was trembling slightly. To try and fix us. It wasn't going to be a quick fix. It wasn't $100-$20 patch. It would be a long, slow, painful process of rebuilding trust, of him learning to see me, really see me, and me learning to forgive him for the years he didn't. A few weeks later, my dad handed me a check. It was for the full amount on the invoice, $15,855.17. I don't want it. Aside, trying to push it back. That wasn't the point. I know, he said, his voice firm. But the point was also that your work has value. This is me acknowledging that value. Put it in a college fund. Use it to start your own business someday. It's yours. You earned it. I took the check. The house is quieter now. The sterile white vases are gone, replaced by the earthy, imperfect pottery my mom made. The emerald dress hangs in a garment bag in my closet. A reminder of the night I found my voice. I never saw Tiffany again, and I only saw Brenda once, in a lawyer's office, where she refused to meet my eye. My relationship with my dad is a work in progress. We talk more, really talk. Sometimes it's awkward and painful, raking over old wounds, but it's real. He came with me to my orientation for the theater internship and asked the head of the costume department a dozen interested, intelligent questions. He was trying. I learned a lot that year. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you will fail. I learned that peace at any price is not peace at all. And I learned that there is a profound, terrifying, and ultimately liberating power in quantifying your own worth and handing someone the bill. My stepsister destroyed my prom dress. But I was the one who set the price for its replacement, and in the end, it cost them everything.